Hello, everyone. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us and then we'll get started. This is going to be very informal, very casual. So feel free to turn on your camera if you feel like it. Don't worry about it if you don't. And we'll get started in a few minutes.
Great. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, so we still have a couple more people joining us. I'm just going to give them about 1 more minute. So we'll get started at about 1:03.
Envelopes, quantity 4 at 250 over 1,000. White boxes. I'm just trying to figure out. Look how we have more of these. Store. We don't keep those.
All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So just to introduce myself, my name is Angelica Hull. I'm the Grants Manager at the Community Foundation of Sarasota County. What that means is that I run most of our competitive grant cycles. So the things that you see on our website under grant opportunities, those that mostly fall into my work area. So we wanted to have these information sessions just to give a little bit more background as to, what we're looking for in these grant cycles, really what are some good examples of applications, and just kind of walking through what the basic requirements are, and then kind of getting into the more nitty-gritty and more detailed. So the way that this is going to work is that I'm going to share my screen. We're going to briefly walk through the website. This is an information session for both our community impact grants and our capacity building grants. And you'll see why they're both included. They're pretty similar grant programs. So we're going to run through both just the publicly available information on our website. And then I'm going to open the floor for questions. So you can bring specific questions, anything that comes up along the way. Feel free to shoot it my way. You can also see we're a pretty small group today. So at any point along the way, if you have questions or anything comes up, please feel free to unmute yourself and just go ahead and ask. This is casual. This is meant to be a time for you to ask questions and get involved and learn more. So feel free at any point, unmute yourself. You don't have to send it through the chat. We're a pretty small group today. So feel free to just hop on with a question as they come up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen for our website. Let me get that brought up here. All right. So what we're looking at here is, I'll just take you to the homepage of the Community Foundation's website. When you're looking for different grant opportunities that we offer, the first place to start is to go under the Nonprofits tab and then scroll down to Grant Opportunities. This takes you to all of our publicly available grant opportunities for the year. We publish them every July, and then we'll update them the following July. That kind of goes in line with our fiscal year. And so that way you can kind of plan ahead. You can see what cycles we're offering, what opportunities we have. Feel free to read through those. And it gives you just kind of a good overview of what our opportunities look like for the year. The first thing that you'll see on this page is our eligibility requirements. These are the same for all of our grant opportunities. So they're also listed on each of the grant pages, but they are here right front and center on the grants page because they're consistent across all of the opportunities. The first thing that we have as a requirement is that you are a public charity, a 501c3 public charity. There are other types of 501c3s out there. There are 501c3 private foundations or private operating foundations. If you're one of those groups, we would ask that you reach out to us directly because granting to those groups comes with different responsibilities that we would need to take on. If you are a 501c3 public charity, it doesn't come with those additional responsibilities. The second requirement here is that you offer at least one current program of local impact in what we consider our community area, which is a 4-county area consisting of Sarasota, Manatee, Charlotte, or DeSoto counties. And then finally, we would ask that you have an approved or current profile in the Giving Partner, which is a powerful database that we host that has over 700 profiles of local nonprofits that work in that 4-county area. So this one's kind of the biggest one. We want to make sure that you have your profile set up in the Giving Partner, that you've logged in, that you've made the necessary updates to that profile, because we do look at it, as we make grants and as we do our due diligence. So we want to make sure that that's up to date. The next thing on this page is an area of frequently asked questions. So this is a great place to kind of dive into some of the more nitty gritty, and I'll let you guys do that on your own. But we have a couple of the most common questions that we get, and then we also have a document that breaks down some of the more common questions in more detail. So feel free to take a look there. And then there's also a link to an article that can help you make sure your Giving Partner is up to date or see if it is or not. And then we get into the grant programs. So the first one we're going to talk about today is our Community Impact Grant Program. So I'm going to go ahead and click in here. And that'll bring me to a more detailed page about the cycle. So community impact, the grant program is really, it's about helping local communities. So it's really a community focused grant program. In that, it's focused on the programmatic side of a lot of nonprofit work and also reaching different populations. So when we say it's community focused, it's kind of the outward facing side of your organization. So we're really interested in using this grant program to address community needs, particularly in the area of creating new programs. So if you need seed funding to launch a pilot program or develop a pilot program to try something new, this is a really great program for you. And then also to expand your reach into populations that you aren't currently reaching. And if you guys can hear in the background, my daughter is playing with a toy that I think is making some beautiful music in the background. So you can see here too, when we get to the funding priorities section of this page, you can see once again, the funding priorities for this program are planning or launching new programs or projects or helping nonprofits to expand their service area. So what that means, what it means for there to be a funding priority is essentially that these are things that would rise to the top of an applicant pool. So we review these applications and projects that fall into those categories are going to rise to the top. Well, we might fund other programs or projects through this grant cycle. The ones that are kind of fit best into those funding priorities are going to rise to the top. Then we get down to eligibility again. We kind of just went through this, the basic eligibility for all of our grant programs. It doesn't change across the different grant pages. The one thing that you'll notice here is that we do have something that says an organization can receive up to $10,000 through the Community Impact Grant Program within a 1-year period. And that is primarily because, there are over 800 nonprofits locally, and, we don't have unlimited funding with the Community Foundation. We have a lot to go around, but we don't have unlimited. And so we want to make sure that, especially through our grant cycles, we're touching, a good amount of our local nonprofits. So this is just to ensure that we can serve more nonprofits and get in touch with more nonprofits. And so we have that 1-year limit for receiving one of these grants. Now that only applies to grant recipients. So if you've applied for a grant and you didn't receive it, that limit doesn't apply to you. So it's $10,000 received through this program, not $10,000 that you've applied for and didn't receive. And then we get down to the application and the review process. We run this cycle in the middle of the month. So if you have applied for a grant through the Community Impact Program by the 15th of a month, you'll be reviewed kind of the following month. So our review process takes about 4 weeks. What that looks like on our end is that we have applications come in. We'll review them on the day after the 15th. So you have until midnight on the 15th, your application in. The 16th in the morning or whatever the following business day is, I'll pull them. We'll do an initial internal review to make sure your Giving Partner profile is up to date, to make sure that your application kind of fits the requirements of the program. And then what we do is we send your applications out for review by a grant committee. So that committee reviews all of the applications on their own. So we have multiple members on that committee. There's staff members, board members, community members. And we go ahead and send your applications out. Every committee member scores them on their own using a common rubric. And then we come together about a week later and we have a committee meeting. At that committee meeting is really where we make choices. So while the applications will have a score kind of coming into that meeting, making sure that they align with the program and really fit with what we're looking for, at the committee meeting is really where the choices are made, where people are free to express their opinions, ask questions, ask for more information. If there is any more information needed, that's when we would reach out to you directly and get in touch with to kind of answer any questions that the committee has. And then, so the committee will meet, they'll make decisions, and then we go back internally, we start processing, and we will reach out to you with a decision. So the time frame is generally, if you apply by the 15th of the month, you'll hear by at the latest the 15th of the following month. Whenever you're ready to apply, you can look at this apply now button. That'll take you to our grants platform. It's an online platform, so all of our applications are digital. And you can apply now, or if you want to prepare your application in advance, which we really highly recommend, just because, there can always be tech issues, or, I know a lot of people want to put some thought and time into the application. So you might want to type it up in Word first, and then transfer it to the digital application when you're ready. And if you want to do that, you can go ahead and preview the application in the PDF form right here. And once again, we have that for all of our grant cycles. So any application you want to see in advance, you can just click that preview button and it'll take you to all the questions. So that is the general overview of community impact grants. Going back to our grant page, we're going to hop over to capacity building. We're going to cover that one a little bit more quickly, mostly because it's very similar, but just has different kind of funding priorities. So when we look at our capacity building grant program, we are looking internally. So we mentioned that community impact is really looking externally at community needs and the best way that your nonprofit can serve your community. When we look at capacity building grant program, we are looking at what do you need to make those things happen? What do you need internally? So once again, capacity building grants can be up to $10,000. The same limit applies, up to $10,000 can be received per year through this grant cycle. And it's made to respond to organizational needs that can help you improve your ability to fulfill your mission. When we look at the funding priorities for capacity building, we've divided them into 5 categories. And mostly these are kind of some of the common categories that we see come in through this program, that things that can really help boost organizational capacity and fall kind of within that $10,000 framework. So our first one is fundraising. That doesn't mean that capital campaigns come in through here. For fundraising, we're really looking at, maybe hiring a consultant to kind of develop a fundraising plan, possibly, contracting with a platform that could give you an online giving module, looking at a donor database or a CRM tool, things that fall into that way of fundraising. For leadership, we're looking at board development, professional development, staff development, things that you might want to bring in to help kind of guide the leadership of your organization. Communication, we see a lot of applications for website redevelopment and for communications consultants, people coming in and helping streamline your communications and develop those in any way that you need that to happen. Evaluation, we're looking at impact measurement, program tracking. If you need to bring in a consultant to help develop those tools for your organization, this is a great place to apply. And then finally, we have emergency organizational needs. For this, we're really looking for things that you couldn't prepare for. So, if a tree fell on your air conditioning unit and broke it and you need $10,000 to get that up and running again, absolutely. What we're not looking for emergency needs is something that you could have prepared for but didn't have the opportunity or didn't plan for. So we want to be careful in the differentiation there. We saw a lot of emergency needs come in with COVID. Obviously, no one could foresee COVID. There was a lot of needs that took place, that we needed to respond quickly to things that are happening in our community. those are great fits. Things that are less good fits are things like your air conditioner is 20 years old and it's just time to replace it. That's less great, primarily because we would want to see that your organization had taken the time to, think that through and how that was going to impact your operations if you had that advance warning. So even then, if you came to us and you said, our air conditioner is 20 years old, we have fundraised, $15,000, we just got a quote back at $16,000, could you help us with the end? That's a better application where we want to see that, you've thought through some of those needs that are longer term or that have been approaching for a while, versus ones that are totally unexpected, which are a great fit for this program. Eligibility, same thing again. So once again, that $10,000 limit. And application and review process is the exact same as community impact. And the reason for that is that these two grant cycles are both reviewed by the same committee. So the same committee looks at both. What that helps us do is, it helps us, number one, get a really good feel for the broad range of needs in our community. And number two, it helps us see, if organizations are coming in through capacity building and they wanted to build some type of capacity, and then in 6 months, that helps them develop a new program. We want to know that because that's exactly kind of what we would hope to be doing through these programs. We want to be able to see the relationships between our grant funding, and we want to see the way that those impact needs in our community. So they share a committee, so they're looked at the same time. The other nice part to that is that if you are a little bit unclear as to which of these is a better fit for your proposal, if you apply to one and it's technically a better fit for the other cycle, we're reviewing them at the same time anyways with the same people. So if we did decide to kind of bounce them back and forth, we can do that. And then once again, there's the apply now button when you're ready to apply, and a preview application button for preparing an application in advance or getting a feel for what the questions look like. So with all of that said, I am going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to open the floor for questions. These can be specific, they can be general, but feel free to shoot any questions my way. Feel free to unmute, you can ask, or if you're more comfortable sending it through the chat, you're more than welcome to do that as well. Yes, Roberta, I can see you have a question.
Hi, yes, I do. Thank you for having this session. It's very helpful. I have I hate to be specific, but I have a situation where we're looking at expanding for dog services, service dog program. Would that go under community impact, where we're trying to address the needs of the disabled, or would that be more under the animal grant?
I think that would depend. I think that would depend on a couple of things. Number one, I would say probably community impact, because you're going directly to your community needs. But should the need for that program be above $10,000, the animal welfare grant cycle has a higher limit. So if you need more than $10,000, I would say go through there because there's a higher limit to that program. Okay.
And then for under the capacity building grant, when we talked about the emergency needs, so considering that just periodically things will break down or things will need repair, do you fund that, or does it need to be a specific incident?
So it depends. So that's where we we'll open it up for the application. So yeah, I think the things that are the better fit for that program and the better fit for that emergency needs, like I said, are things that you couldn't plan for or couldn't foresee. So let's say, you bought a computer last year and then it died and you need to replace it. And that was totally unexpected because it's a 1-year-old computer. That type of thing is a great fit versus, if it's a 25-year-old computer and you've known about it for 5 years that it might break down soon, that's a less good fit.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, it does. And then one of our programs that we have is to provide like emergency funding to an individual that maybe got their electricity turned off because they can't pay the bill, or they got kicked out, so they need some amount of money for rent, of a new place. Or they had their car broke down there, there's someone that's disadvantaged and their car broke down, so they need those repairs done in order to be able to go to work. So we may fund those, if they qualify under our program. Would any of that community impact grant apply to such situations?
So that one, I would love if you have a need there, I'd love to set up a separate time to talk about that in more detail.
Okay.
Because we actually have a support system kind of set up in Sarasota, Manatee, Charlotte, and DeSoto County that does something very similar. So I think we would want to talk about where those overlaps happened and if they were local or if they weren't, and just make sure you know about our program and we know about your program, and then
Okay.
figure out the best fit from there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So feel free to shoot me an email, and we can set up time to talk about that.
Okay. I'll put my hand down then. Thank you.
Hi,
Of
Joyce.
course.
Joyce has a question.
All right, Joyce.
You had a listing on there about website redevelopment, and that is a need that we have. We have a website, but we struggle we don't have the technical know-how to make it as effective as we need to, especially as we look ahead to things like the Giving Challenge, where we want to do special things on our website, to make it easy for people to click through and make a donation. We'd like to hire somebody who is it, because we spend hours sometimes trying to figure out how to do something, and we may not even come up with an optimal approach.
Okay.
Would that sort of fee for a web development service be applicable under the capacity building grant?
I think so. So a couple of things along those lines. Something that we've seen, so yeah, it would depend if you wanted to keep it in-house or out of house. It sounds like probably out of house, but if you were looking in-house, I would say definitely hiring a consultant or a trainer who works with whatever web platform you're working with. We've definitely seen applications for that. Someone who can come in and train staff on how to use technology so that they are more comfortable with it. That's definitely something we've seen come through. Versus out of house, so if you wanted to hire somebody to do it, I think the big thing there would be to say, we want to hire somebody to get this started, to do this. What we would want to see is most of these grants are 1-year grants. So they cover a 1-year period of time. They're not intended to be long-term fixes. So while I think we would be comfortable coming in if you said this was a need and we wanted to see how it worked. We wanted to, set up this relationship, build this relationship. I think that could definitely fit. We would just want to make sure that you were aware too, that there probably wouldn't be like year 2, year 3, year 4 of that funding.
Okay, well,
so with that, I think it would just be good to show like a sustainability plan, or say, like this first year would allow us to collect X amount of data that could convince our board to allocate funding for this in the future, or something like that.
That makes perfect sense. And honestly, I have a technical background. It's just not up to date. I'm retired, and I would love to be trained. And we have several people who would like to be more self-sufficient. So training.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's another great option. So you could even look at, whoever you're using for web platform hosting, if you wanted them to come in, and if they have consultants or anyone who could come in and train your staff, that would absolutely be another option.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions?
I have a question.
All right.
When you're talking about board development training, leaderships, and so on, would something like having available the, all of the tools from the company called Board Source? Because I know that's fairly expensive. Is that something that would fall under that, or is that just kind of too
I
vague?
think it could. I don't know that much about that company. Tell me a little bit more.
It's a platform where you get a lot of newsletters and documents and trainings and strictly board related. So when you have, especially when you have new board members or people who are new on being on a board, it's a plethora of great information. But
Yeah,
it's
I think
expensive.
something like that. Yeah, I think something like that could fit. I think depending on the expense. So once again, this has that $10,000 cap. So if it's more than that, you could request partial funding for the support through this grant cycle. I think the other thing that would be good in that type of request would be, since it's a resource, I think it would be really good to include something like a pre and post survey with your board, something that said, at the beginning of the year, like how many times do you get newsletters about being a board member, or have you gone to trainings about being a board member, and then post survey that said, how many times have you used this service over the last year? What did you learn from it? Something that could show that they were using it and that it wasn't just a passive resource, I think would be a helpful thing to include in that type of application.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Now, can you answer questions on the animal welfare grant?
I can. There's another information session for those coming up in like a week, but I can answer questions on that too.
Well, I saw it's got 2 funding priorities.
Mhm.
So that is, I'm assuming that that's where we need to focus.
So same thing, funding priorities aren't exclusionary. So it doesn't mean that if they don't fall into that, if your project doesn't fall into those funding priorities, that it won't be considered or it won't fit. It just means most of the time with funding priorities, honestly, the way that they're designed is where we have the most money. So if you're familiar with how community foundations work, our grant
Right.
cycles are being funded out of funds that we have here. And those funds have purposes. So sometimes those purposes can be super general. They could be, unrestricted or for animals. And sometimes they can be really specific, for healthcare of domestic animals in Sarasota County. And so when we design funding priorities, what we're doing is trying to highlight where we have funding so that you can see kind of, this is an area where we have more available resources. So we'd like to see more applications that fall into that. More so than saying, if you don't fit these priorities, we aren't going to fund it, if that makes sense.
It does. And is it a minimum 10,000? I mean, because what if your ask is less than that?
So one of the reasons that we set it up for some of our larger cycles, you'll see it like animal welfare and equity and access, they have a minimum of 10,000, mostly because community impact and capacity building are also available throughout the year. And those have a maximum of 10,000. So if you're coming in with a $5,000 ask and you want it to be responded to quickly, community impact and capacity building are great opportunities for that. Versus animal welfare and equity and access grants we're looking kind of for those bigger projects, longer term projects where we're going to commit a higher level of funding.
Okay,
So
that
that's
makes
why
sense.
it's designed that way. If it doesn't ever fit, also you can also reach out to me with specific questions and we can always talk through that.
Okay. And I do have one more question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
So we have a business plan. We've been working with the Patterson Foundation on that. And we're looking to add dermatological services to our clinic, but we need the equipment. Does that fall into any of these grants?
Yeah, I think it absolutely could. So it would depend just on the funding, on the number of funding. So if it's under 10,000, I would say look at community impact and capacity building, just because those are faster turnarounds. They're reviewed monthly. So I would say there you could look under capacity building and kind of look at that as, or under community impact, depending on how you would be measuring. So if you're measuring, what you would be measuring would be, number of services provided. I would say that would probably fall under community impact because it's impacting the animals in our community.
Right.
And I think that could be a good fit, especially when we talk about, expanding programs or services that could fit there too, where you're saying, we weren't previously able to offer this. We will be able to with this equipment, and we're anticipating, being able to serve X number of animals.
So that would be capacity then, right?
I think it's kind of one of those negotiable ones. And once again, this is exactly why they were reviewed by the same committee. I would probably put it under community impact because you're using that equipment then to serve members of the community.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, Joyce with another question. What if it's a project that's larger than $10,000, but the money from the grant would fund a portion and we could show where the rest of the money is coming from?
That's absolutely great. We would love that. So that can definitely still continue to come in. In the budget section of our application, we have a question that says, does your request make up the whole of the budget for this program? If you say yes, it'll just say, okay, upload a program budget. If you say no, it'll say upload a budget that shows the total budget for the program. And then you can show us kind of where that other funding is coming from.
Okay, and what if some of the other funding is other grant applications? For example, this has to do with the community park where we have some hardscape that we have to pay for, but the plantings, actually, we can get a grant from the Native Plant Society, for example.
I think that that's great. Normally what people will do in their budgets there is they'll put like a line item for that grant, and then you can also just say whether or not that's pending or secured. We're really used to seeing a lot of applications that come in with part of the funding still being up for consideration.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, and I see a question in the chat that says that someone had a conflict here time-wise, and is the session recorded? Is there other ways to see other sessions? Yes, this session is recorded. We had one other previous session that was recorded. They're going to be posted on our website, so they'll be available for reference at any time. So you're welcome to rewatch this one or rewatch that first one. And then I think there's one more coming up in the spring. It's a couple months away, but there will be another one coming up this spring too. But the recorded sessions will also be available on our website. All right, do we have any more questions? All right, well, if not, I'm going to wind down our session for today. As always, feel free to reach out to me at any time as questions come up or as more specific things come up along the way. Email is a little bit easier to reach me. I'm working remotely right now, so email is a better way to get in touch. But you can find my email address on the website. My name is Angelica Hull. I'll also send it through the chat here just in case anybody needs it. And don't hesitate to reach out anytime with specific questions as you go through the process. And thank you so much for being here today, and thanks for learning more about our grant cycles. We appreciate all of your time and your energy. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
We
so much.
appreciate it.
Bye.
All right, talk to you soon.